are you doing?
I'm okay, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
I know you're doing a lot of interviews now, right? So it's like back to back and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's sort of that's the time of it's the season. We're in album launch mode, so you kind of have to get into that headspace where you're bouncing around, saying
Okay.
things that either make or don't make sense to whoever asks you questions.
You know what? I realized you're doing a lot of interviews now. You're probably getting asked the same questions over and over again. So I'm not going to ask you the same questions.
Well, I never answer the question the same way twice because I can never remember what I said the last time. So
That's
you can ask me whatever you like. I love that you've got cool guitars there. It looks great.
that's my son's. Anyway, thank you. You can't see them all. Anyway, I'll show you them later. Here, I'll show you this one. This one's really cool. This was my dad's. It's a balalaika from Soviet
Wow,
Armenia. Isn't it funky?
that's amazing.
Thanks for speaking to us at Montreal Rocks. Do you remember we spoke a couple of years ago on the phone? No.
Well, yeah, well, I remember because again, my violin teacher is Armenian, so I remember I always connect with people of Armenian heritage because I grew up with this formidable musical figure in my life, and I've always felt very connected to that.
What was I going to say? We went off. It was a phone interview, and then we went off on a tangent about AC/DC video, about the jailbreak video and how it was so cheesy with the cut off jean shorts. And we went on to this whole. We were supposed to talk about you were touring with the Anyway Gang, and you had just released. I think it was about 3 years ago, and we just went off on a tangent. But anyway, I won't.
Those are the best interviews, especially if you end up talking about cut off jean shorts. You're heading in the right direction. These are the really important things in rock and roll.
Exactly. So on that note, when I heard the album name, it was The Adventures of Ben Blank, right? And I don't know why, but I kept calling it Mel Blancs. Do you know who Mel Blancs is?
No, I don't know.
No, I'm sure you do though. Do you watch Bugs Bunny?
Yes.
Okay, so
Looney Tunes, like back in the day.
Yes.
Yeah, I grew up on it. Yeah.
Okay, so Mel Blancs did all the cartoon voices. Like he was the one guy who did.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, you should Google him. He's hilarious. Well, he's dead now. He did like Porky Pig. He did blah, 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 blah. That's all, folks. He did everybody's voice. So I was like, oh wow, Mel Blancs. Like he could be all these different characters and stuff. But that's not who you were going for.
Well, in a strange way, it is sort of exactly that. It's the idea that blank meaning the absence of. It's not so much about the absence of something. It's just that it can be filled in however you as the listener choose to fill it in terms of what that means to you. But also in my mind, the idea of wiping this slate clean in your life from time to time, not just necessarily in one big epiphany or apocalyptic sea change in who you are or who you want to be, but this idea that you can, we just sort of live tethered to our past all the time. It's just part of who we are. But how much a role that past plays in your future, that's a decision that we make. It's not necessarily written in stone. And I just sort of latched onto that idea that your past can be a meaningful thing to you, but it doesn't always have to sort of determine every step that you take as you walk into the future, and leaving yourself open to reinvention. I mean, every album is an act of reinvention in some way. Whether you can do that intentionally, you can say, I'm going to diverge from everything I've done in the past, or you can sort of, you can see it as an opportunity to draw with a different palette of colors, and I think I've come to value that, that every single record represents a different chapter or a step, either sideways or forwards, sometimes backwards too.
Well, it's your 8th studio album, and it's like also every album that you release, or every song or whatever you're going through, piece of art, could be music, it could be anything. You're at a specific time and place in your life, or you're going through certain things in your life. So your perspective's going to change, you're going to change. It's like we're not the same person. You know, we're
Mhm.
never the same person. People always want you to be the same person, right? All the time. That's why I love artists like Jack White and Beck, let's say, because they keep switching it up. They don't always have the same sound,
Mhm.
and you're not always, you know, coming from the same perspective. But I kind of found I love the first track. It's a very rockabilly kind of reminded me of that Johnny Cash song, you know, I've Been Everywhere, Man. You know that one?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
it's a lot of short rhymes and you're listing a lot of stuff and you're a go-getter and you're this, you know, and it was very upbeat. But then a lot of the other tracks, you have a lot of sad songs on this album. And I was like, is this a breakup album? It's like, what's going on? Because that's that's where my mind went. There was a lot of kind of sad lyrics on the album. Or you, do
Mhm.
you want to get into it or not really? Or
Well, I mean, I think that's, yeah, it's definitely a part of it, to the point where that first song could only be the first song, because if you put it anywhere else in the record, it didn't make sense whatsoever. So, but you know, that song, the first song, for all the sort of chest pumping and bravado that
yeah.
the character's trying, he always undercuts himself. Every fifth or sixth line is always sort of an admission of a deep character flaw in there. And you have to kind of listen to it. You know, he'll say, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. And then it's like, I'm a masterpiece faker. Or he'll say, I'm this, I'm this, and this, you know, so I'm a secondhand name dropper. So it's not all, it's not all sort of,
Bravado.
bravado, you know, it's sort of hollow, it's hollow bravado, you know? And I think that there's something that those are hard things to admit, you know, about yourself. And I feel like it's the same thing, sort of the sadness of the record as well. That's also, for me anyway, it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to my personality, but it's something that I feel less reluctant to share that than I would have
Mm.
before.
Well,
Uh,
there's that vulnerability of like, even in,
mhm,
let's say, Cascades with all that river of tears and shipwreck and water, you know,
mhm,
there's a lot of water images, raindrops on
mhm.
walls. It's very emotional. And then when you're like, where did I go wrong? And I was listening to it and I'm like, oh no, what happened? Like it I mean, that's the way I interpret it, but it's my feeling of it is sort of a man reaching a certain point of his life and reflecting and saying, okay,
Mhm.
now what? You know, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much the case. I mean, I'm not, you know, I think the admission, or even the welcoming of vulnerability into your life, is an important part of being human. It's something that we are extremely reluctant to do as we're younger, where you feel like you have to sort of have this, present this image of being this impregnable fortress, you know, and that's not something I necessarily feel I have to hold on to anymore, you know. And for me to make music, I have to make it from that place now, where it's me, it's honest, and it admission of all these things, you know, including the sadness and the joy in your life. Whereas before, I think I would have written it into a character, you know, like Ray Davies. Everything was always told about, you know, through, you know, Tin Soldier Man. It's like, oh, I can say everything I want to say. I can reveal how I'm feeling through the lens of this other character.
Well,
Now I don't feel as much although I guess I've done it through this overarching character, but it's not specific to each song, you
no.
know, and it's up to the listener to decide who Blend Blank is. Is it, how close is that to me? How close is that to themselves? How much of themselves can they pour into that blank slate, you know?
Well, a lot of like rock music, and I mean, I just saw like Mick Jagger on SNL this weekend. I don't know if you watched it, or Keith Richards was being interviewed because they just released their new stuff, and they're like in their 80s and they still want to be, you know, rock stars and bad boys.
Mhm.
There's I think Mick Jagger just had a kid not that long ago, but I mean that's he did. I don't know, but that's like the other extreme. It's like we are aging and we do have to sort of acknowledge and accept, you know, where
Mhm.
we're at. And I personally believe like the best lyrics are vulnerable lyrics, you know, lyrics that really make you feel and think, you know, like Tom Petty kind of lyrics.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think, and again, that's a point that some people do it naturally right from the beginning. If you listen to, you know, like a Smith song, there was always that sort of open wound vulnerability available. I didn't really write from that perspective for a very long time. You know, I sort of, and I'm not saying that I was hiding necessarily, but I think there was always that feeling in it, and it's perhaps part of the rock and roll ethos, is to present this sort of like swagger to the world, and it's a very hard thing to let go of, really. You know, especially when you drink as much of the Kool-Aid as we as I felt I had, you know, in that regard. But I can't make music from that perspective anymore. Not honestly, anyway.
Yeah. Well, you're not the same person you were when you released your first album. I mean, you know, and you're not the same age, and you haven't had the same life experiences. I enjoyed Afterlife too. And it was like this, won't be a slave to destiny. And it's, I mean, you're at a more mature place in your life, but you're still not going to, you know, you're going to put up a fight. Like, you're still in the game, kind of. That's what I got from it.
Yeah, I think that song is very much, yeah, like I said, vulnerability has its limits too, you know. I've taken you out into the hall. I wanted to show you the outer hallway here of our I'm in my rehearsal space today. So but yeah, I think there still has to be that feeling of living now. And that this is some of the contradiction that exists in this record. Is this, again, there's always this looking forward to, like, what does the future hold? But yeah, I think talking about Afterlife is a bit of a contradiction that way, in the sense that it's not it's a song about embracing the here and now, and not putting everything off to another time, and not waiting for things to get better down the line. That you sort of a carpe diem song, you know, a Dead Poets Society song of making sure that you're present in your life as much as you possibly can be. And I think that that's very much the spirit of rock and roll, and in its best form, is this embracing of, like, a very intense embrace of the present. And it's something you kind of have to, it's almost like an exercise. Like, you have to remind yourself to live in that way sometimes.
Are you a person that really lives in the moment, or do you find that hard to do? Or are you in your head a lot? I'm
in my head a lot, I would say. But I'm not opposed to trying, you know? And I think, like I said, I feel like that the idea of living in the moment is a muscle that you can exercise. And I try to do that. I pull myself out of my own head. But I can't, you know, I'm definitely I'm an introspective person. And maybe that's just how I was born, or maybe that's just a result or a product of writing songs my entire life, and sort of having to spend time thinking about how I think, and spend time thinking about how I'm feeling, and trying to channel that into music in some way.
Well, when we had spoken last time, you had said that you were an English lit major at McGill, right? So we had that in common. So you like to read a lot. People that read a lot, or, you know, are interested in literature, are usually analytical, right?
Well, I think that's where I struggled with it, to be honest. I as much as I loved I went into literature because I love reading. Right. And I found that as soon as I started dissecting, or having to sort of, you know, peel back every layer to find what the sort of machinery was in the literature, it's almost like seeing the making of video of your favorite movie. You know, some people love that. Some people want to see behind the scenes and the props and the, you know, the lights and the cameras. I don't. I want to embrace the magic. Yeah. And so I think that that's where studying literature for me became, as much as I appreciated the fact that it revolved around reading books, the analytical side of it was very much against my nature, I think. So yeah, I'm not, it's something I don't think about necessarily, what kind of person I am. But I would definitely say I wasn't analytical. For the amount of time that I spend in my own head, I'm not an analytical person. I'm not trying to break things down into sort of molecular level to figure out how they all piece together.
Well, then, like, your songs are then coming from a more emotional place. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a song like Cascades is just coming from a purely emotional place. And, you know, you can interpret it in so many different ways. Like, is this a statement, a sort of biographical document, or is this just how, if you try to put all those feelings into music, this is how it expresses itself, you know? But in the same breath, I'll write a song that I find uplifting, like Afterlife, you know, will come right afterwards. So it's just about sort of embracing all the different swings, you know, and that's what an album to me is it's never just going to be a linear experience of emotion. It's emotion in all of its.
But that's how life is, though, right? You have your good days.
Exactly.
There's days when you're curled up in fetal position and you just want to sob and not leave the house. And there's days, you know, you're on stage and you're performing and people are cheering for you and you're the rock star and you're like,
it's
right.
Yeah. And everything in between, you know? And I think that that's just sort of something that you have to, well, I mean, you live it, but also when you're trying to make music, sort of embrace all of those different extremes that exist. And even some of this, even the mellower, more moderate, uneventful things in your life can also be celebrated in music as well. I mean, those are the lion's share of the moments, you know. It's not the crazy time on stage and it's not the lowest lows. What about all that other life that you live in there? And sometimes that won't necessarily come out in the lyrics, but it'll be in the music, you know, the sort of mid-tempo loping songs that feel the way a day feels as it's, you know, starting and sort of drifting along, you know.
I like Bad Country. It's Bad Country. Is that the one? Number 8.
Yeah.
It was very like cinematic and it was like reminding me of like a Western film, like cowboyish. No, you're just that. I keep singing these highway songs, you know, it's like this the Lone Ranger kind of thing, right?
Well, that's very much who Ben Blank was to me as a sort of, if I were to draw a picture, it was a, you know, a lone cosmic cowboy on horseback, you know, not a hero, not a villain, just somebody going off to try to
figure it out,
you know. And that's exactly, that song is a painting of the landscape for me, you know, where this is all happening. So yeah, I mean, this record to me is I think the colors of it come from desert, wide open spaces, and, you know, dust and sunsets, and yeah, and then you kind of fill that in with emotion and stories.
Well, the beauty of music is like you're alone in your room writing songs and lyrics and whatnot, and then once you put it out there, it could mean so many different things to so many different people, right? Like the album cover too. It's just like a blank face with like a desert scenery inside of it. And it's very surreal looking, you know, and it's sort of, I mean, does it represent like an emptiness, or is it just you fill in the blanks, pardon my pun?
Yeah, well, no, exactly. I mean, it's all of those things. There's also a raging storm in that picture, you know, in the middle of the face. It's and to me it's all of those things, all the extremes of that emotion.
So I'd seen you when you were traveling with touring with the Anyway Gang for a while, and that looked like you were having fun. I saw you at Cafe Campus. When was it? A couple of years ago? When were you at Cafe Campus? Do you remember?
That was last May, a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a fun show.
Yeah, that was great. And, you know, I love that sort of, that channel to go tap into something different and just be one of 4 guys standing up there with a guitar and singing my parts, and you know, just sort of periodic contribution.
It's gonna be a big night. We can see you let the animal out. Big night. Oh, let your hair hang down, girl.
I know, this whole social media thing, and we're too fixated on our appearance, and it's really, as we get old, well, you're a man, so it's not so bad.
I don't know.
No?
Well, I mean, it's a, it's an, I don't think anybody, I don't think it's completely avoidable for anybody. But especially if you work in a line, an industry that always puts a heavy emphasis on youth and youthfulness.
Yeah.
And I think that for sure the music business is a very sort of youth driven vessel. So it's something you can't help but think about it. We made a video recently, and in the video we projected all these old videos of ourselves. And
yeah.
I haven't seen pictures of myself from that in a long time. It's not like something I go back regularly and look at pictures of what I used to look like in 2002. But you can't help but say, oh man, I really was a lot younger. Like I know it's me, but like there are no wrinkles. There's no this. There's no gray hair. There's no,
Isn't it crazy when you look at pictures of yourself from like 20 years ago, and back 20 years ago, you thought, oh, I look like crap. But then you're like, man, I look so much better, but you didn't even realize. Do you know what I'm saying?
And you didn't have to try.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we got to try hard.
Like I was telling you, I just saw Keith Richards on an interview on recently. And I just love the way Keith Richards looks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like an older human being who's been around, and all those lines on the face and that they tell stories in a way.
Have you ever seen? Have you ever seen?
Yeah, his hands are look like tree roots.
Tree roots, exactly, like ginger roots. Do you ever see like fresh ginger?
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that those hands can play guitar that way, because they look like hands that could, hands of like a lumberjack or something. But he's just goes to show. But yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. Getting older, and it's not something you want to dwell on, but it's just there, and it becomes. I think part of that is because you feel the acceleration of time.
Exactly.
And that, I think that's more worrying than anything. You start to feel this picking up, like every day just sort of bleeds into the next, and then a year goes by, and you're like, what happened? And then you start to sort of panic about how much time you have left. So I'm more preoccupied with that than I am with, appearance, or like, I don't know, the idea of maybe that won't be the case always, but right now and that's where, we're talking about the song Afterlife.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's in response to that as well. This feeling that time is moving so quickly now.
When did that hit you? Like at what age did you suddenly feel like, oh, I'm running out of time? Because I know that up until a certain age, I was okay. And then suddenly I became super conscious of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm 49 now. It was probably 44, no, just before my 45th birthday, where, again, it's not like you're running out of time. You have probably, hopefully, if you're lucky, just as much time ahead of you as you do behind you. But what will the nature of that time be? Like, what can you devote in terms of your body to that time? Like, will I be able to do the same things? I think that the realization that, actually, you might only have about 10 or 15 years left with your body being able to do the things that you've asked it to do. And even then it's going to be a sort of, diminishing returns as you go along. But there are a whole bunch of things that if you want to do them out there in the world, physically, you got to start to get to it now. I'm hoping that I have the faculty to write songs and write music, and enjoy all the other things in life for a very long time ahead. But yeah, there's this thing. It's like, how much longer is your body going to be able to, be what you need it to be? Man, this went to a really existential place. Hey, this is like our last one was about cut off jean shorts. Now we're on
yeah, you never know what you're going to get.
Physical demise.
Well, I'm all about Gabor Mate and Bugs Bunny. It could go any way. Do you know who Gabor Mate is? No,
I thought it was a type of tea that was an elixir.
Oh, sorry, no, because I'm reading his book now. It's called The Myth of Normal.
Mhm.
I'm doing this because the book is on my table. Like,
Okay.
if you could see it, right? It's called The Myth of Normal, and it's about trauma. So it's a
Mhm.
dark book, but yeah, but probably you as well. Like you can be like really silly and funny or really dark. I mean, that's
Mhm.
what it is, right? Well, like in the songs too, I find there's a lot of contrast on this album.
Mhm.
Like it's really funny, it's really sad, it's really dark, it's
Mhm.
really upbeat. You've got, right? That's
Yeah, I mean, that's um again, I can't say that that's how, it's not like that's how you live. It is in a way sort of representative of life and what you live through every day on an, in terms of like the emotional cycle that you live through. But I'm not necessarily going through like phases of dark, phases of light, phases. It's all sort of mixed in together, And I think when you're writing songs, you're just trying to pick out what are the more sort of profound things that you felt, and trying to inject those into the songs. And they can be quite difficult to identify, like to actually separate them, because it's all mixed in together. Those moments of light and darkness, they're not separated by vast like periods of time. They can happen in very quick succession. So, or be piled onto each other, like superimposed on each other. So yeah, you're trying to see them with some clarity and then write about them.
Do you feel like the songs are there inside you, but you just have to let them out? Or
I mean, I think I've thought that way before. I'm not necessarily convinced of the whole, musician or songwriter as antenna phenomenon, like where it's just like drifting around and the ethos and you're just channeling it. So I think there's a lot of work that goes into it. I think there's a lot of craft that goes into it. And the more you exercise that muscle, maybe the more present it is in your mind as well. And I think definitely like I have a musically leaning personality and mind. But I've worked really hard at, learning how to write better and better songs over the course of my life, and I think part of that is having an open enough mind that when you just sit down with an instrument, you let something come out, you play it, there is that moment of just sort of spontaneity, and you're not necessarily consciously trying to do something, but you feel quickly when something is moving you, and you can identify it. You say, "Oh, I'm feeling something here. I'm going to pursue it, or I'll push it more." And then when you stop feeling something, you learn how to reverse, like back to the point where I'm feeling it again, and then you change directions. And that to me is sort of like what the songwriting process feels like. It feels very accidental and random at times, but it's governed by these laws of connection and connectedness, like again through feeling. Like I don't care what the notes are. Yeah. I don't care if it's how any of it's put together. Is it making me feel something? And if it is, I'll keep going. And if it isn't, then I'll stop.
I find there's not that many great lyricists out there anymore like there used to be. Or are there any songwriters that you admire? Or who are you listening to now?
Oh yeah, I mean, like Kendrick Lamar is a great lyricist,
yes. Yeah.
And he tells stories, and he has, but not just in each song, but there's, he's able to tell an overarching story, and that's what I love in records too. Paul Simon for me is, it's always different for different reasons. Bob Dylan is like just. I always have that feeling like, man, how does a mind think of that image? Just to, I don't know, what's the sense of changing horses in midstream, something like that. Just like a line that kind of comes up and I'm like, how did you possibly work that into this song? Whereas someone like Paul Simon, everything he does is it's very poetic and beautiful, but it's also a slave to the rhythm of the song. Like everything is very, very rhythmic. And so the word, instead of choosing one word, he'll choose another word because that word has a better musical or rhythmic quality. And I also really, I relate to that. I try to have the songs that I write, are very much focused on rhythm. So the words can't just be a word that is, again, a beautiful word or an evocative word or a word that paints a certain picture. It has to be the right word musically for the song. So that the selection process becomes based on that. Is this word contributing musically to what you're hearing, not just in terms of painting an image? Yeah. Morrissey, Ray Davies, obviously John Lennon, those are people that I sort of think of as being able to either tell stories or songs that I connect very intensely musically to because of the words.
I love that you said Kendrick Lamar and Paul Simon, because I'm the kind of person that lyrics pop up in my head all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. Everything is a lyric. And, that ain't nobody praying for me, that line. And just recently, too, there's a Paul Simon line that I love when he says, losing love is like a window in your heart. That line comes up, like, I feel that line all the time. You know what I mean? Like, there's just, Paul Simon's just one simple line can mean so much to so many people. Is there anything you want to add? I know you've got a lot of interviews to do. I could talk for a long time. I've got a lot.
Well, I'm sure we'll get another chance soon enough. And I'm just very glad to have new music out there. It's always kind of a shock at how profound an experience it is to make something. Like to make something that didn't exist before, and you make it, and then I guess this is part of trying to convince people that it's worth listening to, and
the Projection song is Projection? Yeah. That's been on the radio for a while. That was the single off The Adventures of Ed Blanks. And
Picture of Love was the first single.
Yes.
And then Afterlife, and then now Projection. So it's the song's been the record has been sort of gathering steam, but to actually finally put it out and say, okay, this is
and you'll be touring soon, no?
Touring in February. Yeah. February, March, and April. So I know. We picked the best season.
I know. Where are you going to be performing in Montreal?
It's at Théâtre Beanfield.
Okay, the old Corona. Okay, well,
exactly.
I love that theater. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great room.